Well, happy post-winter carnival, Whitefish! I hope everyone had a great weekend. Whether it was watching the parade, participating in the penguin plunge, eating pancakes at the Moose Lodge, or retrieving your child after being taken away in the paddy wagon by a rambunctious Yeti. Speaking of Yetis, reports are coming in from the mountain that Yetis have been poaching first chair and carving up all those precious early morning fresh tracks.
What's up, babe? Yeah, just about to get fresh tracks. Gonna be sweet. Guess it snowed like 9 inches last night. Yeah, what are you losers doing down there? Sex to be you. Yeah, no, yeah, I'm wearing my helmet. Yeah, all right, bye, Mom. Love you too. Why are you strike out already? This is ridiculous. I'm the first one up here. It's tracked out here too. What's this? Yetis was here. Only one thing that pisses blue and has that bad grammar. Yetis. Yetis!
Today's guest is Cris Neckar. Cris is a hacker, cybersecurity expert, and venture partner at Tuber Capital. We discussed the future of education and technology on rural states such as Montana and the amazing impact Tuber Capital is having on the development of new life-saving therapeutics out of their office right here in Whitefish, Montana. Today's episode is brought to you by Thrivers Coffee. If you would like to help support the fight against human trafficking, visit thriverscoffee.com to order your coffee and make a difference today. Cris Neckar, thanks for coming on Hello Whitefish today.
Thanks for having me.
You have a long list of many things that you are, and I don't even know where to begin. You are an entrepreneur.
Sometimes.
A technologist.
All the time.
Philosopher.
Most of the time.
Hacker.
All the time.
Skier.
As much as I can.
And an AI skeptic.
Yeah, I mean, to some degree, yep.
Fascinating. I don't even know where to begin, but we met because we met here in Whitefish.
Mm-hmm. Where did we first meet?
We met at the Snug Bar.
That's right.
Because you guys had your house up on the mountain.
Yep.
And I was bartending up at the Snug Bar.
That's right, yeah.
And it was a nice, beautiful summer day, I think in August.
I remember the drink I had, actually.
Oh, what was it?
You had some crazy, you were working on some infusement with like weird herbs in there or something.
Oh, that's right.
It was really cool, yeah. I think you had something like pickled almost.
I remember what that was, yep. Yeah, that was fun. And how... I love the story about how you and your lovely wife, Tiffany, even ended up in Montana.
It was a total accident. I didn't even know it was here.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. I was on Google Maps. So we were kind of doing this exploration where, so we were living in Silicon Valley, but I grew up on a farm, and Silicon Valley is a lot for me.
Yeah.
I was sort of, it was thrust upon me, you might say. So we were both working for ourselves, and we kind of looked around the world and said, we don't have to be here. Where do we want to be? So we were kind of doing the exploration, and I'd spent a lot of time in Wyoming and in Colorado and all the normal places. And we sort of knew that we wanted mountains, and we sort of knew we wanted wide open spaces and beautiful. But I was just on Google Maps one day, and I was kind of scrolling around the U.S. and saw this big lake that I had never heard of. Now I'm a little bit embarrassed to say that, but it was true 10 years ago. And it was called Flathead Lake, and I was like, oh, this is cool. Let's look up some photos of this. So I pull up the photos, and of course the first things that come up are those crazy photos where you have like a boat that's floating on the water, but you can't quite tell where the water ends and the sky begins. And I showed them to Tiffany, and we were like, this can't be a real place. This is impossible. So the next time we had a free weekend, we just booked a flight out and I didn't know Whitefish existed yet. So I would have come here first if I had known.
Yeah.
But we booked a Airbnb in Lakeside. It was summer, and hung out on Flathead Lake. And my wife, well, now wife, at that time she was just my girlfriend. But Tiffany immediately was like, this is it.
Wow.
And so we were, she started calling real estate agents. We started looking almost immediately. So
what I'm interested in is what the job market and the educational system is going to look like for kids nowadays and the next generations, especially for kids coming out of rural areas?
So I grew up on a small, it was a 60-acre farm, kind of. The closest town was this unincorporated sort of intersection where there's 3 houses and no one lives there, and it's, you know, there's there's nothing. So I don't really count that. But the closest real town that sort of, you know, has a city government and actually like water and power and things like that, was about 15 minutes away. So it was, you know, it was on the edge of like, you can ride your bike there, but it was still pretty remote. I mean, as a kid, the farm was what we had, and sort of the kids around me were the people that I could hang out with, and there wasn't anything beyond that. I didn't really know that there was a world outside of that. So growing up there, you know, I was spending time in the woods. I was spending time on my bike, riding over to friends' houses, and I very specifically remember, you know, when we first got the internet, I had gotten kind of interested in this little Apple computer that we had, and I'd started playing with the manuals and all of that, and the concept of dial-up internet, we didn't have it at first. At first, the neighbors started getting it, and I just remember being absolutely fascinated by the concept of I can connect with anyone. Like, there's all these people out there that I had no way of contacting, and this idea that anyone doing anything interesting in the world, all you got to do is just email them. And back then, especially, like, people weren't, you know, their inboxes weren't full of spam and all this stuff that we have to deal with now.
It was truly like specialists and scientists and people who are really into technology were the people who were on it. And
the world still works that way. That's the kind of cool thing. You know, you gotta be willing to go out and get it, but it still kind of works that way. But yeah, I mean, so my first internet connection, we didn't have, you know, my parents weren't willing to pay for, you know, the $20 a month or whatever it was for dial-up at that point. Mm-hmm. So I stole internet from our neighbors. I was over there one day and I stole their password and used it to dial up. Yeah. And I got caught for that one pretty bad. I think I was like 11 or 12 years old or something. Oh. But yeah, and then I just started playing in these communities of, you know, back then I didn't know what I was looking for, but you just have this access to, and also the other thing that really pulled me into the world of software engineering and development, and it was really, I was a builder way before I was a breaker. So I wanted to, the concept of taking nothing and making it something. You can ideate, like, just create something in your mind and then put it into code, and all of a sudden the computer does what you tell it to do. So I made a lot of games when I was a kid and fun stuff like that. Yeah. But yeah, the hacking definitely came a bit later.
That's awesome. So what is a hacker from your point of view, and not like what the media or glamorization of it is?
Yeah, I mean, I really rebelled against the term for a long time. Sure. As I think a lot of people, like, actually in the industry, just because, you know, you watch movies and TV, and the hacker is a very specific thing, and he's the guy that you go to, and he sits there for a second and types a little bit and he goes, "I'm in," yeah, or whatever, and that's not how it works. But I've come to really embrace the term, and embrace it beyond what it means in computing, because I think what a hacker really is someone who looks at the world as not what it is and what the set of rules tell you can exist, but at what I can make it into based on what I like, the little tools and the little pieces that I have. So it's I think a good analogy for hacking is Legos, right? There's the people who take the instructions and they take the set and they build the thing, and then they say, like, well, I did it. And then there's the people that take all their Lego sets, mix them all together, and go, what can I make with this? And the hacker is the second. The hacker is the person who looks at the world and says, what can I create?
Damn, that's awesome. So out of high school, you kind of get into, you were going to go to college, right? For computing, software engineering?
Yeah, I ended up, so as one does when they're young and dumb and fun, I met a girl. And so I was so hacker mentality. I'd found a way to go to mostly college. There was a little 2-year college right next to us, and I found this law in Wisconsin that basically required my high school to pay for me to go to college. So I actually didn't go to my I about halftime my junior year. This is not because I had good grades. Like, I don't want to give the impression that I was a good student. But I just found like kind of a loophole that let me halftime my junior year and then full time my senior year do college instead of high school.
What?
And so I was in a college C++ class, and there was this foreign exchange student, this super pretty blonde girl in the class with me, and I started talking to her. And we went on a couple dates, and then she found out I was 16 years old and dumped me. But then eventually, when I turned 18, we got back together.
Oh, how funny!
And she was like this incredibly brilliant student who was from Ukraine. And she was on the fast track, and she was going to Marquette, one of the best engineering schools, all of this. And I was, I barely squeaked through high school, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to go to Marquette with you. So they wouldn't let me in, of course. So I had to find like a way to get in. So I realized that if I got a full-time job with the school, I was automatically admitted, number one, and number two, they'd pay my tuition. So I applied as a physical security guard. So my first couple of years of school were sitting at night. I sat in one of the dorms wearing, like, I used to call it my plastic badge. I had like and I was the security guard sitting at the gate swiping people's badges. And then during the day, I'd just go straight into classes and do class.
Yeah. That's hilarious. That's really interesting because you then, one of your businesses later was doing red teaming.
Yep.
Now, I think this is a great segue. What does red teaming mean?
So red teaming is really looking at the security of a company or yourself even, looking at it from the attacker perspective. So trying to put yourself in the headspace of the person that you're worried about. And really to the extent of acting as that person. So one of the very common services that it was kind of my first job, and then I later ran a company that does this, but is actually acting as an external red team. So you're hired to act as the aggressor, like act as the person who you're most scared of and do all the things that person might do. And then you sort of deliver the report and you say, this is what we did, this is how we did it, and these are the things that you could do to make it a little bit better.
Can you give me an example of, like, say I've got like a tech company, I've got a server, I want you to get into it. How are you going to break in? Like, what are some ways you do that?
Yeah, I mean, so typically the scope is a little wider than a specific. The temptation with a company is to say our company is this small little thing. It's the application that we have or the service that we provide or something like that. But really, when you look at what is a company or what are the attack vectors into this thing, it creeps out. Like, scope creep is crazy, and there's all these little things that you don't think about that can be like just that little like chink in the armor that get you a little closer and a little bit closer and a little bit closer. So typically the way that we scope these things, like, if you're scoping what's called like a penetration test usually, or a red team exercise, typically what you do is you define this is your goal. So if you had an application like you're talking about, that application might have a database, and that database contains a bunch of people's names and phone numbers and maybe credit card numbers or something that you don't want the bad guy to have. So rather than say, attack this application and see what you can do, you say, can you get this? With this being a credit card number in the database, say. And then the red team comes in and they say, well, what are all the different ways that we might be able to do this? Because people access that, and they might do that from their home computers. Not all of the ways in are through that one computer, that one server that you think of as the main attack surface. So certainly you want to look at that and see if there's a simple way.
Sure.
But the much more hacker mentality is to go, what are the other ways that I could possibly approach that? Like what other things touch this? Like who mops the floors in the data center where that thing lives? Can I dress up as them? Can I pick the lock on the back door of the data center? Or more indirectly, there was a movie, I think it was 80s, called Sneakers.
Oh, I love that movie.
So good.
Robert Redford.
My voice is my passport. Verify.
Yeah.
Yeah, so good. But yeah, I mean, it literally boils down to things like that of going to people's houses and, a lot of the time.
Like social engineering.
Absolutely, yeah.
Would you actually try to like break into places?
Yeah, all the time. Yeah, I think one of the less glamorous stories that I have is I once spent about 5 hours in a bathroom because I had physically broken into this large bank in San Francisco, and once I got in, there was nowhere to be because there were just people everywhere, and I was sitting there going like, somebody's gonna realize I don't belong here. So I just went and sat in the bathroom, and I was like, I'll come back out in an hour and see if there's like a desk that I can sit at or something. There wasn't, so I ended up staying. Like I went in around lunchtime because I thought it would be least busy, and I stayed until 5 o'clock when everybody left. And
they like locked the doors and you just were in there?
Yeah, they locked me in, and then I just like sat down at a computer and hacked it from the terminal.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
And then you worked at Google after that, is that right?
Yeah. So I started a kind of a penetration testing company.
Mm-hmm.
We did a lot of like application security, which is that's more like application review, where you're looking at the source code and really in a targeted way, trying to find all the vulnerabilities in a system.
Gotcha.
And then I think it was around 2008 rolled around, and I got a call from a friend who had left. NeoHapsis was the name of the first company. But I got a call from a friend who had left, and he said, hey, if you ever wanted to work for Google, send me your resume right now. And I'm sitting there going, I ended up dropping out of college. So I'm sitting there with a high school diploma, barely. And I'm like, really? You want me to work at Google? Okay, sure. But I sent my resume and got an instant call back. And I was just like, what is going on? But it turned out what was going on was the Chinese government had broken into all of Google, and they suddenly realized that hiring software engineering PhDs was not the way to actually defend against that threat.
What? Wow.
Yeah.
Fascinating. And so you worked on Google Chrome, right? Doing security?
Yeah, pretty quickly. I spent about, a couple months on kind of a generic sort of consulting team inside Google, and then pretty quickly, I was friends with a couple of the people who had kind of founded Chrome, and went onto that team because we had sort of decided that having an embedded security team for such a big project was kind of something that we needed to do.
So is the Google campus really as epic as they say it is?
It feels. Well, sorry, I'm not going to say feels. I'm going to say felt, because Google has probably changed a lot since I was there. But when I started, it was probably, something like 8,000, 9,000 employees total worldwide. And it still felt very much like a college campus.
Cool.
It was, there was no directive. So that's maybe the biggest thing. And I don't know how much that's changed, honestly. I need to ask somebody who still works there.
Yeah.
But when I started, it was nobody tells you what to do. It's just your job is you're a Google engineer,
right?
And go figure it out. So at least on the security teams, it was very much just this kind of sink or swim. Go find a way to make the world better, which is really cool in some aspects and really, really scary in others.
Dang, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And now you work for a little company called Two Bear Capital.
Two Bear Capital.
Which is really, I think most people who live in Whitefish like drive by the Two Bear Capital building all the time. They know Two Bear Farms, which is like one of the epic organic farm.
Yeah.
Two Bear Air, which is like the premier rescue place with super high-tech helicopter that if you're stuck in the wilderness, that's what's going to come and get you. So Two Bear is definitely synonymous with some pretty epic endeavors. But what does Two Bear Capital do?
So Two Bear Capital specifically is a venture capital fund.
And what is venture capital?
So venture capital is very early stage investment. So the venture basically means you're going out into the wilderness. You're trying to find the early idea. before it has revenue, before, you know, everybody's already interested, before maybe even the market is proven out or anyone's even done, you know, that in business. Find the things that can actually move the needle on what humanity is and what business can be and what technology can exist and things like that. So when you look at technology specifically, the venture capital industry as a whole has really been one of the drivers in all the tech companies that you think about. Were you know, there were these kids who had big ideas, who went out and they were like, I need to find somebody who believes in me, who can give me enough money to actually do this. And that was the VC industry.
And what areas of technology and stuff does Tuber Capital focus on? Like, what's the mission of Tuber Capital?
So we're primarily focused on life sciences. And by life sciences, I mean basically the therapies that do things like cure cancer.
What? Wow.
One of our core goals is we are hunting cures for all the debilitating diseases and all of the horrible things that you know, humans still have to deal with, even with all the technology. You know, you have your iPhone apps and you have, you know, all your great stuff, but humans still suffer and humans still die and humans still get cancer. And that's the next frontier as we see it of technology is figuring out the human body and figuring how to hack that.
And it seems like there's just been so much exponential growth in technology, but also in biotech and whatnot.
Biotech is so fascinating. When I didn't I didn't design to end up as an investor or in VC or any of that, but when I first got involved with TBC. I was very much on the, you know, software security side of the world, and I was trying to invest my time in the things that I thought could make that world better, but was convinced by by Mike, who's become a very close friend, that the next frontier of hacking really is the human body and understanding the human body. And computers are great. They're this really, really complex system that no single human can ever understand the totality of. So there really is, you know, approach for a single person's life, an infinite number of directions that you can go. But then when you look at the human body and biology in general, the problem set is just exponentially larger.
Yeah.
It's a computer that there is no manual for.
Right.
There was no designer, and we just have to reverse engineer it. I've spent a lot of my life reverse engineering software, and just the idea of reverse engineering biology in the human body it's so fascinating because there's no end to it. There's no moment where you go, oh yeah, we've got it. Okay, we figured it out.
Right.
Yeah.
I saw Mike give a fascinating speech at FECC about CRISPR, and it was a packed room, and the way he explained how CRISPR works, and this was like 5 years ago maybe, and I mean, he's such a great orator and a great speaker, and the way he like explained it and his enthusiasm about it, I was like, I want to be on that guy's team.
Yeah. No, and that's, I mean, that's maybe my favorite thing about my job now is you get to talk to such a diverse set of people. I mean, we invest a lot in technology as well, which is, you know, I'm able to add something to that.
Yeah.
Biology, I'm still very much in the realm of, you know, I like to say I understand 1 and 3 words during the conversations, which is great. But you just get to see this breadth of things that people are discovering and doing, and the discoveries in biology, just every day there's something. I think you know, I was in a meeting a couple weeks ago where I came out of the meeting and I turned to one of my partners and I said, my mind was just blown 3 times in a 1 hour meeting.
And for you, that's saying something.
It's so cool. It's so cool.
Why is Tuber Capital then in Whitefish? And if I guess to that end, I know there are some really fascinating tech companies and biotech companies coming out of Missoula and Bozeman. Yeah. So why is Montana kind of becoming this hotspot for these startups?
I think people are starting to realize what a special place Montana as a whole, and especially the Flathead Valley, is. And I don't know that I can define what, like the edges of what that magic is. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was certainly immediately apparent to me. Here's an example that I always give when I kind of describe this magic. I grew up in a really small town in a really rural place that's really beautiful. It has all those components. And the second that I turned 18, I moved far away.
Me too.
I kept moving further and further away. And even when I had, agency to pretty much like move wherever I wanted and do what I wanted to, it never occurred to me to move back. Here's the difference with Montana. I meet locals all the time who had the same path as me that were like, let me escape. Like our friend Morgan, who when they got to the place where they had figured it out and they had seen the world and they discovered what else is out there, they said, I want to move back.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something about it.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that is, but it's a really, really special place. And almost every day, I'll be out downtown and I'll meet someone and just, again, it's that I can't believe you ended up here. Like,
right.
With everything that you've done.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think back over the last week, how many people have you discovered in Whitefish that you're like, wow, that exists here?
Right.
It's a daily thing.
It's incredible. So having grown up in like a rural area, what do you think the education system and job market looks like for kids coming out of high school these days with things changing so drastically, things getting automated? Maybe
the most important thing to think about is just outside the box thinking. That old shrink wrapped, what your parents told you to do, where you graduate high school, you go to a 4-year college, you get your bachelor's degree, then you go on to a master's, and you sort of, sink into that pigeonhole and pigeonhole and pigeonhole. That construct is, I'm sorry to say, I think it's going away, and I think it's almost gone. A college degree doesn't get you what it used to. Most of the reason to go to college at this point is it's the connections that you make. And the reality is, like I was saying earlier, with the internet, you make those connections without it. You don't have to go spend, tens, or it's getting to the point where it's hundreds of thousands of dollars to get a piece of paper that says that you know how to learn, when you can go out into the world, meet the people who are doing the things that you're interested in, learn from them, and then guess what happens on the other side of that? They already know that you can learn because they've been working with you.
Right.
There's this really crazy story that I always think about when people ask me about this. I was at Google, I was living in Silicon Valley, and I was working with a lot of the Facebook engineers, like the early Facebook security team, the Apple security team, the Microsoft security team was there. All the tech companies, the minds in computer security, were all in this one place. And we all, once a month, we would go, it was a Thursday, we would go to this little, it was a brewery, but it was also a restaurant. So there wasn't, they didn't check IDs at the door. So we'd go in and we'd just jam out, and we'd have some beers and we'd hang out and we'd talk about what we were working on and all of this. And a few months into doing this, these high school kids started showing up. And there was this group of about 5 high school kids, and they would, they'd be sitting there sipping on their waters or their Shirley Temples or whatever they were getting, and just listening and just hanging out listening. And they inserted themselves at like 16, 17 years old into the absolute pinnacle of the computer security industry. And they were surrounded by these people who were like the minds at that point. And every once in a while they'd interject and they'd ask questions and all of this. And they came out of that, the 16-year-old, a couple months into this, all of the top security engineers at all the top companies in the world know his name, know what he's working on, or helping him with his high school projects, or like helping him like figure out like how to, like he's got a problem with coding, like they're teaching him how to fix it. I was thinking about this, and I wonder where those kids are today. I mean, that was 10 years ago.
Right.
And I'd be willing to bet they're the top of the industry now, because they hacked it. They just figured out, like, where are those people? They went there.
Yeah.
They never needed the Stanford degree. They never needed any of that because they figured out the way to get it for free.
Dang. Oh, that'd be so cool to know where they are today.
That's a hacker.
That is a hacker. And there's so many other schools that aren't Ivy League that like are great schools. Like is it University of Illinois is like a great tech school. Some great computer science schools.
Yeah, I mean, one of the first schools that that decided, oh, computer security alone is an important thing was DePaul University in Chicago. And I was working as kind of a penetration tester. I was leading what was called the application security practice for NeoHapsys. And I had a professor from DePaul reach out to me, and he was like, "We really want to offer classes in computer security. Like, can you be on so I started on their advisory board for their they were starting like a master's program in computer security. And so I sat on a couple advisory board meetings, and I was like, well, what you really need to teach is exploitation. It's all well and good to like, yeah, I know how to run software and defend, but the important mindset is how do I break in? And he looked at me and he was like, cool, do you want to teach it? And I did my little stint as an adjunct professor, which I'm not sure if I'm any good at teaching, but it was definitely a good learning tool for me.
That's awesome. And I think that's what's cool about, with all of that in mind, FVCC, like, I'm not sponsored by them, but I am going to toot their horn. Like, they offer so many cool courses that are applicable. Like, they've got a brewmaster program.
That's so cool.
They've got their new performing arts center.
Yeah.
So I think what's cool about watching a school like them, they kind of understand how progressive they need to be as far as education and trade skills, and that are going to attract and keep kids here. Because I know that's a big problem is, what's the saying that Montana students are Montana's greatest export right now?
Yeah.
So how do you keep it? Like, that's the big question. How do we retain the next generation to work here, to start businesses, to build the new technologies?
Well, the things that I'm really excited for are all the projects. I mean, if you start to talk to people in town who are doing, who have that technical side and have moved here, everyone is talking about the idea of like hacker spaces and innovation centers, and this idea of injecting, just making places where people who are into that sort of thing can get together, and not with the goal of necessarily like making money or oh, I want to be like the next business leader or something like that, but just with the goal of, I want to create, I want to make something, I want to take something that was nothing and do something cool, and that's where technology in my mind is art. It's that process of creation. It's having something in your head and going, wouldn't the world be cool if this existed? And then taking all the pieces that exist in the world and all the people that you know and all of that and saying, how do I piece that together and make something?
Oh, that's amazing. So being lovers of science and technology and also lovers of the occult, we got to talk about UAPs and UFOs. Did you know, like, a fun fact about Montana, if you've heard that story, like in the 60s, I think, what's the Air Force Base in Great Falls, whatever the Great Falls Air Force Base is, that's the site where a UFO came down, hovered in front of the gate where one of the nukes out on the east side is, and like turned off all the nukes, like everything shut down for like 15 minutes.
Yeah, I didn't know that. No, that's a new story to me, but I want to look it up.
Yeah.
Well, it occurs to me that at that moment in history, the nuclear launch codes, I don't know if you know this fun fact. The nuclear launch code in the U.S. was 01234567889.
Shut up.
No one ever changed it until, I want to say, it was like late 70s.
You've got to be kidding me. But it was all like manually entered, so you had to be on site. Like, you couldn't.
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Yeah, unless you found a way to like get that radio. That RF.
Oh, the RF frequency,
yeah.
That's like straight out of Spaceballs.
Yep. No, we're special.
What do you think about all these UAPs flying around? And this is Montana related because we get a lot of sightings up here too.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to go a little more philosophical and scientific with it than I think individual data points are fun, and it's it's fun to think about the idea of like aliens and weird phenomenon and all of that. But I'm very much kind of the opinion that humans are almost infinitely complex. Brain chemistry especially is really complex. So I think people have these experiences. I don't think anybody's like some people are probably making them up.
Sure.
The Bigfoot thing was probably a little bit made up. But for me, it's more interesting to think about like the possibilities of, you've heard of the Fermi paradox?
Of course.
The Fermi paradox is one of my favorites.
Oh, totally.
You look out I mean, I have been absolutely geeking out on James Webb.
Oh, I know.
Like astronomy. It's like the amount of data that we're getting and just new input and new things that we're learning about like the age of the universe and just how much is out there and all of that. It's just, it's never been better.
I know.
I mean, I love infinite data, and we're like, we've done so much in the last couple of years. But yeah, the Fermi paradox is like, look around us.
Right.
How has nobody contacted us yet? How have we not met the aliens yet?
Right.
And I love all the theories about that. Like the like dark forest theory is
I know
is maybe the scariest. And then
from what's that book called?
Three Body Problem.
Three Body Problem.
Started, yeah.
And you know, like I got turned on to that book because Obama said it was the best science fiction book he'd ever read.
I disagree with Obama. It's definitely not the best science
fiction.
It's not,
but I just couldn't get into it because the characters just where I felt.
Yeah,
it's a different style of writing.
I mean, it's translated from
that's true.
It's Chinese author, so you gotta give it a little bit there, and also it's very much through the lens of kind of Chinese culture and the sort of collective and I think a big part of the story is actually the rebellion against the collective,
right?
Which is not. In the U.S., that's our modus operandi.
Yeah,
like, we are rebels.
It is.
Yeah.
So the dark forest theory is the idea that there's one alien, not spoiler alert, there's one alien civilization that is just hunting every life form in the universe.
Even more than that. It's the concept that the universe is chock full of life.
Yeah.
But it's all really scary. So everybody's hiding.
Oh, okay.
All the species that are out there on their own little stars, like going around, on their planets, are all like, we don't want to be found because we know how scary it is. And if you think about, I mean, one of the reasons I like it is if you think about humans as an alien race that came into, ecosystems. And one of my favorite / least favorite facts is when humans discovered Australia, I'm not talking about like even the British, I'm talking about when the Aborigines first discovered Australia, the first tribes went across. I think it was something like 90% of species were extinct within a couple hundred years.
What?
And that's just humans do that. I mean, we take care of ourselves and we don't take care of anything else. We take care of what allows us to continue to live. And that's biodiversity. I mean, getting into the question of like biodiversity on this planet, that's a whole other philosophical topic we can cover.
I know. Yep. Just look at how the indigenous tribes in Montana have been impacted.
Europeans landing on this continent was a dark day.
That was devastating. But here we are.
Although
my ancestors are from Ireland, and I'm only like, they came over like 100 years ago. No, more like 150 to 200 years ago. So
yeah,
still, they paved the way, I guess.
I don't think the Irish have ever hurt anybody. The Irish are just a happy people.
The potato famine was a little bit of a dark stain.
Yeah,
thanks, British.
It wasn't great. As long as the British don't come in and invade your homeland, you guys are great.
Let's touch on AI. So AI is super fun.
Yeah,
we're starting to learn a lot about it.
Yeah.
But people are afraid that it's conscious,
or
it's going to be conscious.
I would describe the current generation of AI as an attempt to simulate and emulate a human.
Yeah.
The large language models have become very, very good at pretending to be human.
Yep.
And so there was a, the Turing test is kind of the famous test of AI and computing, which is, you put an AI talking to a human, and can the human tell that it's not another human talking to it? And I think it's fair to say the Turing test has been passed.
Right.
We're there.
Yeah.
But I would also argue that the Turing test was pretty much passed years and years ago as well. I remember playing with ELIZA, which I think the original ELIZA bot code, which was, it's not even approaching a neural network in the way that we understand them now. It was just kind of a simple like language model that sort of compared words and word usage, and then tried to add a word at the end of a sentence that made sense in the context.
Yeah.
Based on the training set. And I remember playing with that back in, I think it was actually made in like 80s or something, but when I was in college, and actually at the first company I ever worked for, I put an ELIZA bot on. We had an IRC channel, which was kind of text-based chat, and the owner of the company, the guy who'd founded the company, was on the chat room, and I put an ELIZA bot on there and it was, you know, connected in from my computer, and he called me at home one night and he was like, somebody hacked into your computer, they're on our channel. And I was like, what's the name? And he was like, oh, it's ELIZA. And I was like, no, that's just a chat bot that I put on.
Wow.
So and I went back and I read all the transcripts, and he had talked to it for about 30 minutes, and he was like, who are you? What are you doing here? And it was, you know, it was a dumb chat bot. So it was saying things like, who are you? What are you doing here?
Oh, that's so funny. But yeah, AI is interesting, you know, because I think you hear artificial intelligence, and it's a little misleading because really what AI is, if I understand it correctly, it's an algorithm that's studying large data sets and then making statistical guesses on an outcome that is...
Yeah. The way I sort of explain it is... I'm trying to think how to not get too technical. So ultimately, a training set is a vectorized representation of a bunch of data points, right? And what I mean by vectorized is you take a piece of information, like in large language models, it's known as a token. And then you map that token into this like high dimensional space. So, you know, if you were to imagine it in 3D space, you'd have this block that's like from here to here and here to here. And then you'd take the word the and you'd go like, okay, the we're going to put right here. And then if you're training it on like the mongoose ran fast or something like that, mongoose would be right next to it, and ran would be right next to that, and fast would be right next to that. And if that's all the training data that you have, then the only possible outcome is the mongoose ran fast as you travel through that space. But what you're really doing is training this high dimensional space on all of the text, like all of the corpus of human knowledge. So as you do that, you know, you pipe something else into it, and it's like the teacup is hot or something like that. Now the word the used to be over here. Now it's somewhere in between, because now the can be right before mongoose, or it can be right before teapot, and we're not sure. Is mongoose related to teapot? Does that live over here and the lives here? So you can imagine just continuing to train this, right? And we're not talking about 3D space. We're talking about like millions and millions of dimensions. But in this high dimensional space, what you end up with is these vectors, they're called. So it's a point in space that has a trajectory and a velocity and you know, directionality and all of that. And then when you feed what's called a prompt into that, you go, okay, we're over here in space based on what the prompt was, and then you start to travel through and you go like, well, what's next? Statistically, what would the next word after this be? And based on everything that you've trained it on, you can then you know, find a path through that, and that's the output that you get, is that path.
That is probably one of the better descriptions I've heard about what AI is. That's pretty good.
It's taken, that's the product of months of me trying to figure out how to describe it.
Well, that kind of makes sense why it's called like a neural network. Mm-hmm. Having that vector space, kind of like, okay, that makes sense. But that's kind of why I guess people get a little nervous, because that sounds a lot like a brain.
Well, someone who actually works in the space would correct me all the way down to, well, actually neurons are this and this and this. And yes, it's a lot more complicated than that, but
we'll get some people on to explain.
Totally.
Yeah. Speaking of Chinese authors, one of my favorite authors is Ted Chiang. He wrote the Story of Your Life short stories, which one of those stories is what the movie Arrival is based on, which is a fascinating idea.
Fascinating take.
One of the best alien movies, because it focuses on just communication.
Yeah. How would we even do that?
Yeah.
What I always like to think about when, you know, people bring up the topic of like, okay, what if we find the aliens and then figure out how to communicate with them and all of that. As you know, I have a tattoo of a octopus, and I'm obsessed with this incredibly intelligent species that lives right next to us on this planet, that broke off from us biologically over 1 billion years ago. I mean, think about that.
1 billion years ago.
1 billion years ago, octopus DNA diverged from human DNA. Like by all accounts, I mean, we can look at them and see intelligence in all of these ways. Octopuses farm, like they find their favorite foods and they build farms.
They're emotionally intelligent.
Emotional. They can actually sense emotion across the room. There's evidence of, so they can feel it some way through the air. So even, you know, he's down in the tank and somebody's sad over here, and it will, you know, like emote back to them.
Just watch The Octopus Teacher or My Octopus Teacher.
Yeah, totally.
To see how intelligent they are.
There's a really good book called The Soul of an Octopus too. That's just incredible. It's but we haven't found a way to communicate with them.
Oh, huh.
How do we think that we're going to communicate with biology that is, you know, billions and billions of years diverged, like potentially even built up of different, you know, maybe not even carbon based, like who knows?
Yeah.
Certainly none of the context of living on this planet, like doesn't understand any of the same life forms that we understand, doesn't understand like how the cycle of day and night in the same way that we do. Maybe not even like liquid water, like an octopus at least understands how water works. And we have a you know, a way of understanding that with them. Maybe an alien lives in pools of like, you know, there's like sulfur and like all this planet has like a completely different ecology. So we start here, right?
Yeah.
Let's start with, you know, the really, really smart animals on our planet.
That's a really good idea.
And then maybe we'll have the tool set to talk to the aliens and convince them not to just harvest us when they get here.
So let's wrap up with your favorite sci-fi movie.